Interestingly enough, even though special interests have made tremendous inroads into the political process simply by virtue of the way we finance elections, that has changed and is constantly changing. We are having more accountability. We're having less things being done in the dark. We're having more ability to know where the money comes from and who paid it. In McCarthy's time, I suggest to you that there were no campaign financing laws. The money could come in any amounts from any source, and it would be very easy for those representatives who did not have the best interests of this country at heart, but had their own re-elections at heart, to take money from sources that we would not approve of and stand for things that we would not endorse. So now we have a situation where there is more light on the process, which is good. We have someone who's entering the White House who wants to bring even more light into that process. But we have to take a look at what he did in terms of his candidacy to truly understand what he and his ability to accomplish might be. Because his run for the White House was truly revolutionary. He engaged a generation to get involved in the political process who had written off the American political system. He enrolled more voters than any electoral candidate for president in the history of this country. He certainly raised more money than any candidate in the history of this country, and he did it by people giving on average less than $100 and doing it across ethnic lines, intellectual lines, party lines, indeed homogenize the political process behind him in a way that has never been seen before and makes him truly the first 21st century president that we have, and are likely to see that being translated into his use of power. And let's face it, the purpose of political parties and political individuals is to acquire and exercise power. Power is simply the ability to change events, to dominate the process of change. It is therefore all the more comforting, at least to me, that we have a man who is entering the White House, who understands and has learned the lessons of history, who has studied history, and in fact who has taught constitutional law, which is a defining discipline in terms of someone sitting in the Oval Office. And if any of you have read the Patriot Act, clearly I can tell you that the authors of that act were either not constitutional scholars or simply didn't care, that they felt that the end justified the means. And again, it put us in a position where the Soviet Union no longer exists. We are not confronted with the kind of threat that we were confronted with during the Cold War, and therefore the vacuum that existed at the end of World War II has reemerged and reasserted itself, and lo and behold, we have a war against terrorism, which, not to suggest is not important and necessary, but we do not know how much is being spent, how it's being allocated, who are the beneficiaries, what is being done. We simply look at it in hindsight and say, so far we have not been the subject of another attack, and therefore it must be okay. Well, I suggest to you that may well be true, but it equally may well not be true, and that there could be tremendous amounts of our resources that are being funneled into areas that have nothing to do with our ability to defend ourselves against terrorism. And I suppose you can argue, and I certainly would not hesitate to argue, that the war in Iraq was not a terrorist-inspired war. It was a war for entirely different reasons and entirely different priorities. But having said all that, in looking at him, in trying to divine what it is that he will bring to the process, one of the things to look at is who are his heroes? Who are the people that he quotes, looks to, talks favorably of, and models himself after, or at least looks at in a way that gives us the impression in him that he would like to have aspects of their qualities in himself. Interestingly enough, the most significant is Lincoln. And he often quotes him. He often talks about the challenges of his presidency, and understandably so, because Lincoln, I suppose, in the hearts of almost all Americans, is the quintessential president of the United States. But he takes it a step further, and understands Lincoln's political philosophy, understands Lincoln's ability to use politics and the political process in a very effective way, one of which he has mentioned on numerous occasions, is a bipartisan approach to governing this country. Why is that so significant? It isn't simply an inclusory kind of politics. It is a politics that sends a message to those of your own party that you are not marching to the party line, that you are not unwilling to endorse a candidate who may be from another party if their views more closely represent yours than your own party does. And that, it seems to me, combined with the tremendous power and influence that his candidacy has demonstrated that he has outside of the special interests, outside of the traditional pathways to power, that says to everyone in his own party, and I will tell you my own bias, if you haven't figured it out by now, I am certainly a Democrat. I adore the man, and I have never, much as I have tried, quite honestly, voted for a Republican candidate in my entire life. So you can view my remarks in that context, and certainly those of you who did not vote the way I did can be certainly able to judge whether the validity of my remarks is so biased by my political point of view that it does not have any validity for what we're talking about today. I hope that that is not the case. But understanding that great challenges offer the opportunity for great achievements. Often our best presidents have come to us by accident. If you take a look at those presidents who immediately come to mind, the first is Lincoln. The reality is, were it not for a third-party race, Stephen Douglas would have been president of the United States, and our country would be a vastly different place today. But Lincoln happened to be a third-party candidate. The Republican Party was just emerging, and lo and behold, as a minority elected president, he was able to gain the White House.